Where is it? Hey, everybody. Welcome to Satsang, and we're going to get started just as soon as I can find the place where I can get the questions. Um, I know where to. There it is. There we go. Hey, everybody. Welcome to Satsang, and hello again. I was. Greetings from everybody from Mexico. Hi, Carla. Eli is here. Hello, Eli. Glad to have you. Um, Little technical thing there. I couldn't quite find where I was looking. I'll be looking at the camera as much as I can when I'm answering the questions, but if you see me doing this, you'll notice that I'm having to look at the computer here to get the to see the chat. Jason is here from Jackson Beach, Florida. Awad Aldin Balyani. Wow, Balyani fan. I have a question I've been pondering a while. How does the brain know and remember what consciousness feels like? Wow, I will definitely get to that. Um, as people are arriving, I just want to thank you all for being here. I welcome you wholeheartedly to Satsang. Um, I'm very glad that you have decided to take a little time out of your Sunday afternoon to explore yourself, to inquire into the true nature of your own existence. And it's always surprising to me, having gotten the self-inquiry bug when I was quite young, how it's possible that somebody couldn't be interested in it. I mean, really, when you realize that your entire experience of life, everything, every aspect of it, is determined by your perceptions, and your perceptions are determined by the image you hold of yourself, how could you not want to go right to the source of that image and find out the truth or falsity of it? How could you not want to do that? It's it baffles me, but people aren't interested. They're interested more in solutions to fix circumstances rather than actually understanding the real cause of every event in your life. The real cause of your event is here. It's not out. The events out here are a manifestation. The word manifestation means the appearance of something else. It's how things appear. For instance, this glass appears to be quite solid, transparent, but it's not. It's the vast majority of it is just empty space. But just the nature of electrons and that sort of thing, we experience it as being solid, but it's actually a manifestation of very tiny particles and electromagnetic fields that are around those particles that make it it's solid to our touch, which is simply another form of the same kind of pattern of energy. So things aren't the way they appear. The world as you experience it lives 100% within your perception. And I mean that 100%. You don't experience anything outside of your beliefs and your perceptions. And beliefs, of course, determine your perceptions. The beliefs are the eyes through which you see the world. And the number one belief is the belief that you hold of yourself. That self-image that you're holding, and maybe have been holding since you were a child, determines every single thing that happens in your life. Every choice you make, every deal you cut, every decision, every relationship, every job, everything is determined by your self-image. If that can be grasped even for a second, it becomes profoundly simple to decide that that is the most important thing you should examine. And that's why we're here. That's what satsang is. It is that communion with the truth. It is an internal communion to discover your own truth, to find out not the image that you have of yourself, but who you actually are. Because obviously, before any image formed, you were here. I'd even go so far as to say, before this body was born, you were here. That who you are transcends the body, it transcends all forms. You simply are. But that's not something that you can simply grasp with the mind. The mind can't grasp it, as a matter of fact, because all the mind knows how to do is manipulate symbols. That's all it is. There's representations with words, sounds, visuals, and the like. Representations of our experience, and we manipulate those symbols. The mind cannot grasp formlessness because all it knows is forms. So if you are not a form, and I'm asserting that you're not, your mind cannot know it. So if you rely on your mind for self-knowledge, you will get a nice collection of attributes of you, but not you. You will know all about you, but you will not know you. How do you know yourself? That's really the big question. And that's really why we're here. We're here to explore that. And from my perspective, every question I have, whether it be about money or relationships, the law of attraction, or the deepest non-dual inquiry, they always have at their essence the question, who am I really? And the genuine impulse to seek, even if on the surface it only looks like you're seeking a new car, you're actually seeking permanent, indestructible happiness. And that can only be found in knowing who you are, because once you know who you are, it's game over. You have arrived. Life will go on, of course, but you will no longer be subject to the ups and downs of life, because you will have discovered the real you, which is absolutely constant. So I'm welcoming all of your questions. I got a couple that came in that I really want to answer from email, and then one from one of my students. Before that, we have Judy. Hi, Judy is here. Anne is here. Pam from Norfolk, UK. I so love that. Chrissy McAuliffe from New Zealand. Hi, Chrissy. I guess you can all hear me, as nobody has said, can't hear you, G, can't hear you. So I've got a new, well, it's not new, but I'm using it now. As other people have complained, I have the microphone in front of my face, and you can't see me. Not that there's that much to look at, but there it is. So the first question that came that I wanted to talk about was actually a comment that was left on one of my YouTube videos. And the YouTube video is called Unconditional Happiness, Law of Attraction, and it was an exercise. And it's a very short question from the Chosen One. And I think the Chosen One shows up here as well sometimes. But I hope he does, or she, I'm not actually sure. But I hope so that you hear the answer live. Anyway, it says, GP, I am a soccer player. I want to be successful at it. Is that my desire or my ego? I think pretty much everybody wants to succeed at some sport or at something. How can I use the law of attraction to succeed at it? The reason I'm bringing this up on Satsang rather than just answering it like a law of attraction question, because it's actually, there's a mix here. You know, if you really just do the pure law of attraction stuff like Abraham Hicks or something, the question of whether a desire arises from the ego or for the true self never arises. That question is never asked. It's completely outside the context of the teaching of the law of attraction. The law of attraction is how to get what you want. It is not a moral system. It is not a spiritual system. It is a system for getting what you want. It never questions the nature of the desire. That's good, actually, because it just leaves it pure. It just accepts that the desire is legitimate because you desire it. I find that to be a very good approach. If I desire it, it's legitimate. The problem a lot of people have is that there's a lot of thought about denying our desires. Some desires are good, some desires are bad. You know, I might get a question, and Abraham's gotten these questions, that, well, what if I desire, somebody to die, or somebody to, get injured so I get their job, or, what if I desire to dominate other people? Strictly in the law of attraction, well, that's okay too. It's what you desire. And of course, people with conscience and a sense of spirituality say, I'm not comfortable with that. So there's kind of a hedging of our bets. There's a hedging of our sense of desire, because we're afraid it's going to impact others. So the question is, the desire coming from the ego or is it coming from the true self? Let me explain really how it works. The ego isn't a thing, right? The ego is an idea. It's a thought. It is a thought about other thoughts. There's a collection of thoughts that make up the sense of identity, a sense of me, a sense of self. We give the name to that collection of thoughts, the ego. If you look at all of your thoughts, the things about thoughts about others, thoughts about your job, thoughts about work, thoughts about this show, right? You're talking about mind, right? But mind is just a word. There's no mind. There's no mind there thinking. There's only a collection of thoughts in patterns. There's no ego. The ego doesn't exist. It's not a thing that is thinking, that is creating desires or creating ambitions or hiding in the bushes to grab you and thwart all your efforts at manifesting a better life. The ego doesn't exist except as a belief, as a thought, which means that a desire can't arise from the ego. A thought does not give birth to a desire. All desire arises from the real you, from life itself. Every desire you have. And just look at all your desires. The desire to eat. Is that an egoistic desire? Is it even your desire personally? Or the desire to have sex? Is that your personal desire? No. It comes with life. I didn't make it up. I'd get a lot of credit if I did, but I didn't. I didn't make it up. I feel it, you feel it, everybody feels it. It's inherent in life itself. So you can't say it's my desire, and you can't say it's an egoic desire. It's neither. It's the desire of life. All desire is like that. The desire to succeed is like that. Of course, life wants to grow and expand and evolve. That's what it wants to do, and that is what its destiny to do. Now, our belief in the ego, our belief in ourselves, the ego is nothing more than believing that self-image of you is actually you. When you believe that, you just create a way of being. That way of being is the ego. It's the sense of being a separate self. So with that present, when the desire arises, the natural desire arises within you for anything, it is immediately grabbed and usurped by the ego because it can't create anything. But since it's the eyes through which you see it, you're going to interpret that desire from the point of view of the ego. And now it becomes my desire. And when it becomes my desire, it becomes my responsibility, my burden, the thing I have to do. And because I don't have that desire now, I don't have the thing that I'm desiring, then it becomes my suffering. Because now I'm feeling I've got to have this or I'm not going to be happy, which is the egoic interpretation of all desires. If you take that out, desires are absolutely pure and innocent. and you'll find that those desires, the desire of life isn't in conflict with itself. Life doesn't create a desire to get something from somebody else. It doesn't need to do that. It has infinite resources at its disposal. So the true nature of life is love. It's its nature. It's not a moral standard. It doesn't have to be forced into it. It doesn't have to be coerced or talked into it. It's simply the way it is. That your nature is love. Because it's coming from a place of complete and total abundance. So how do you use the law of attraction to succeed at it? As long as you think that success is something that you get and you need to attract it to you, you're going to have a sense of separation. You might be able to create a new set of beliefs that believe now that you have it and you're attracting it, and then it'll show up. But it isn't because of a law of attraction. It's because your belief has simply allowed you to experience what has been here the whole time. The real way to approach it is not how do I attract it, but how do I remove from myself all the beliefs and assumptions and behaviors and patterns that have insisted that I am separate from it. that have not allowed it to expand, that have put artificial limits on me. Now, rather than trying to attract something out there, your attention goes inside, and the law of attraction now becomes the law of reflection. It becomes the law of internal examination. You see that if something shifts here, it's going to shift out there. It can't help it. Because that's what is sustaining this. This is a manifestation of what's in here. The universe is a mirror. You are simply seeing yourself. If you want to lose weight, you don't buy a different mirror. It won't do you any good. You have to actually change what is being reflected. And so that's how you do it. Success is inherent in you. The real thing is, where did you get the belief that somehow you are not going to excel? That somehow the thing you desire isn't right for you to have? That somehow your desire to develop and grow as a soccer player, or whatever it is your endeavor is, you're somehow limited in that. And to free those desires from the egoic mind actually purifies them. Because it's tainted, it's been painted, it's not clean, right? Because the ego's got its interests wrapped up into it, and it's trying to sustain itself. It's this imaginary thing trying to sustain itself. And so as that goes away, the desire gets purer and purer and purer and purer. And the purer it gets, the more powerful it gets. And the more powerful it gets, of course, the more it begins to manifest in your life. So I hope that answers your question, chosen one. It's a really good one, and it was only 3 sentences, and how long did I take to answer that? 15 minutes or something like that. It's a very powerful question, and I'm really glad you asked. Thank you. Let's see. Buddha's Brain saying, "Great to see you. You're more impactful with the microphone you're wearing." Oh, great. Many thanks for the change. Thank you, Buddha's Brain. That's straight from Buddha's Brain, folks. So, I'm getting some creds. Mike, greetings from Kansas. Hi, Mike. Papino is from Arizona. Carler, maybe problems with internet. Let's see. Okay, let me scroll back here because Awad Aldin Baliani, which I actually think is my friend Sharif, because not many people know who Baliani is. Anyway, it says, "I have a question I've been pondering for a while. How does the brain know and remember what consciousness feels like?" Let's see. All right, I'm going to go right to the heart of the issue. I'm going to address it. I'm not going to try to address it through neuroscience and things like that, because I'm talking to a spiritual audience. I'm not talking to a bunch of business people. The brain doesn't know anything. The body is not sentient. It has no feeling, it has no thought, it has no sensation, it has nothing. The body is just a concept. Everything that we attribute to the body, sensations, feelings, emotions, thoughts, characteristics, functions, all of it are actually attributes of consciousness. It is consciousness that is the sentience in the body. It appears to be that the body is sentient, but it isn't the body. Any more than, this shirt appears to be black and blue, and gray, and some white, gray, right? It appears to be that, but it isn't. If it was that color and I turned out the lights, it would still be that color, but it's not. The color blue is not an attribute of this shirt. It is an attribute of light. Sentience is not an attribute of the body. It is an attribute of consciousness. As a matter of fact, it is consciousness. Sentience and consciousness are the same thing. We believe that thinking is happening in the brain. It isn't. We think all of the activity going on is going on in the brain. It's not. If you want to go the rest of the way down the rabbit hole, the brain is nothing but an image in the mind. The actual mind is not in the body. The body is a picture in the mind. And the mind is the self-image of consciousness. So the body doesn't exist as a body. Just like the ego doesn't exist as a thing. It only exists as a concept. The body, the world, everything does not exist except as an idea. This is, by the way, the heart and soul of the Buddha's teaching. One of the 4 practices of the Bodhisattva is to recognize the non-existence of external existence. There is no external existence. Everything is happening within mind. Everything is happening within consciousness. There's nothing outside of it. This is the consciousness-only model of the universe. And when I get an opportunity to speak in purely non-dual terms, like I do in Satsang, because I can't always do that, I love to go right for the juggler. Right? The idea of there being a universe made out of matter, and that I am made out of matter, and perceiving that universe is demonstrably false. It is unprovable at best, because you can't step outside of consciousness to verify the existence of anything separate from consciousness. So why don't we just go to what the evidence, the overwhelming evidence points at, and that is consciousness is primary. That everything we call matter is in fact nothing but the self-awareness of consciousness. Consciousness knowing itself. That's the stance I take. And to me, it is as evident as the nose on my face. Now, it is completely different from the normal way that we think. But it is demonstrably true. Ponder it for a while, and something inside you will verify the truth of it. Ponder it long enough, and you'll see it directly. And you won't need the knowledge of the mind or anyone to confirm it for you. It will be self-confirming. This really is the way it works. This is what the sages have been saying for millennia, but have not been heard. This is what's being said now by all real teachers, but not being heard. This is the essence of the teaching of the Buddha, who, by the way, somebody told me that they'd listened to Sadhguru, who had said for all of us teachers, spiritual teachers, that it's like there's nothing new. No matter what you teach, the Buddha's already taught it, and he's absolutely correct. In all the studying I've done of the sutras, I am just blown away. He's covered every aspect of human experience that's possible. I've not said anything that the Buddha hasn't said before me. And everywhere I get to some place and I think it's this new and wonderful, this is right, this is fresh, incredible insight, I find the Buddha sitting there waiting for me with a cup of tea. So this is the essence of the teaching. The first bodhisattva practice that the Buddha puts out is becoming adept at distinguishing the perceptions of your own mind. Everything is a perception of your mind. And nothing exists separate from that, which means you are pure consciousness. And at that point, pure mind, pure consciousness become the same thing. So that's my answer for you, Balyani, who's an amazing Sufi writer and poet, just absolutely amazing. But it's not really him. I think he's been dead for quite a while. Let's see. We have Mike. And let's see. Well, yeah, that's not really what I meant with the question. How can we speak about consciousness since consciousness can't speak, right? Consciousness is Who do you think's speaking? Really, who do you think is speaking? Is the body speaking? Is this microphone speaking? I mean, it's the same one who's hearing. I mean, who do you think is hearing? Is the ear hearing? Is this mic hearing? Are the speakers, are your headphones that you're listening to this on, are they hearing? Is the brain hearing? What's actually doing the hearing? What's actually doing the speaking? I mean, I could say that there's this mechanism here. What's running the mechanism? What's pushing the sound out in such a way? What's choosing the thoughts? What's stringing them together in words? It's not the brain. The only thing that ever happens is consciousness. It happens by consciousness, in consciousness, and is made of consciousness. That's all there is. So the brain doesn't remember. The brain doesn't speak. The brain doesn't do anything. The brain is simply an image in the mind. This is very subtle, and well, I'm putting it very bluntly, right? Because all the attributes that you attribute to the brain or the body don't really belong to the brain or the body. That's a mistake. That's the illusion. That's samsara. The moment those same attributes are seen as belonging to consciousness and not the body, that's nirvana. It's that simple. Nirvana is not a place. Samsara is not a place. They have to get out of the world because the world is samsara. The world is not samsara. The samsara is the perception that the attributes that make up the world exist independently of you, the consciousness that is viewing them. The moment you see that they're not, boom, you are in nirvana. That's it. That is the entire shift. And that's the end of suffering. It's the end of karma. It's the end of it's the end of everything except the pure bliss of existence. Because now you are 100% free. There's nothing binding you. You see that all that was binding you is in your mind, is a belief and not a reality. And even that shift takes place. It's not instantaneously you're going to be walking on water, but it's going to start correcting all of the thoughts, all of the actions. Everything is going to start conforming itself to this perception. And you will begin to speak and live from nirvana, which is the ultimate place. You could think of it as heaven as well if you have them more. I.e., why are there thoughts about consciousness? It's good. Thank you for keeping this going. The thoughts about, it's consciousness thinking about itself. And since it's all there is, what else is it going to think about? I mean, infinite consciousness, right? Infinite consciousness. No boundaries, no limits, nothing, right? I mean, it is infinite. It is beyond space and time. It's all there is. So there's only one of them, right? What else is it going to think about? If its nature is to be conscious, it is conscious of itself. So what else? And we experience that as thinking, as all of life. I mean, it isn't just thought, it's the entire range of experience, right? That's consciousness pondering its own nature. You get into consciousness dreaming about its own nature. It has created a universe to experience itself. But it is not an it out there. It is you. You are that consciousness. It's who you are. The consciousness believes itself to be a bunch of people, right? But it's not really true. It's just a belief appearing in consciousness. And ultimately, that pure awareness, that pure consciousnness, isn't even under that belief. It is the image that it's holding of a particular universe. Wow, I mean, it goes as deep as it can go. But the nature of consciousness is to be conscious, right? Well, what's it conscious of? The only thing there is, itself. So it becomes conscious of itself, and then what appears in it is a self-image of it. It appears as to itself, and it forms images of itself. Each one of those images is nothing but a reflection of the consciousness itself, and have no nature separate from the consciousness that is imagining them, perceiving them, conceiving them. This is the law of one. And it's only difficult to explain because putting it into words invokes the mind, and the mind, the psychological mind, the way it's been taught, can only deal with objects. It can transcend that, and then it becomes what they call in Buddhism the great perfect mirror mind. And now the universe and the mind are the same thing. It is consciousness pondering its own nature. God thinking about herself. Wow, that's great. Thank you for that question. I hope we're getting somewhere with it. It's a subtle one. Thank you for persisting at it. I'm very grateful. Mike McManus. Do you have any advice for an awakening being living with a spouse that refuses any offered help or advice with regard to suffering? She thinks I want to change her, just want to help her awaken. Well, first off, make sure that you have no desire to change her, really. Right. First, get to the point where you are absolutely okay with her as she is. That's real love, by the way. And you have to come to that point in a relationship, or the relationship's going to have problems. Right? You don't want to create an artificial rift between people. I mean, you were lovers at one time, you can be lovers again. Right? There's no need for that to end. But what it requires is falling in love again. It requires finding that energy. And what that means is that all of your attention goes into what you love about her. It is incredibly painful to watch someone you love suffer when you know that you could help her, or them, him, either one, right? But they don't want your help. So what do? Well, you give them whatever help they actually do want. You don't assume that you know anything. And you allow everybody to have their own awakening experience. To awaken, and then deepen your own awakening experience. Keep deepening it, until you realize that what you're experiencing is your view about her, is your image of her, is your perception of her, and not her. If you can grasp that, you can realize that she doesn't exist outside of your own mind. And you can now begin to love her for what she actually is, a truly awakened consciousness. She is consciousness. You can look at her and see the self. And that's all you need to do. And if all this other stuff is going, right, just don't create a conflict. You don't need to. You don't need to awaken her. You don't need to take away her suffering. You simply need to be with her in her suffering. That's compassion. That's the bodhisattva. That's the one who is totally present. Just be present. And I know it hurts like hell when you're holding the solution to someone's problem and they just can't see it. But that's it. If she can't see it, she can't see it. So just stay present. Love her. Love her like she's never been loved before. And something will open. And if nothing else, you guys will just be you'll get closer. And that closeness is what creates the environment of safety that allows all the stuff that is causing the suffering to come to the surface. When I counsel people on relationships, create the safe space for each other. Be each other's best friend. Total compatriot. Total best friend. Then you've created the environment. It's exactly what I do when I talk to people about interact with yourself. When you create the safe space within yourself, all of the junk, all of the traumas, all the wounds can start coming to the surface because you're not fighting with them anymore. So create the same thing in your relationship so that it's this beautiful, safe place. So she is so safe with you that she doesn't feel you're pressuring her for anything, that everything can come up and be healed. And it will open her up, I guarantee it. Thank you for that. It's such a beautiful thing. And cherish her desire to relieve her suffering and awakening. And wants to speed her awakening. Cherish that desire. But let that desire kind of unfold how to make it happen. And just let her be herself. Let that desire, see the end state, right? And just be the awakened being. Believe me, that will be felt. That sense of love and safety is so palpable that there's nobody who doesn't respond to it. So, thank you, Mike. Beautiful question. John David, all the world is a conglomeration of the 5 sense perceptions? Yeah. Yes, it is an aggregate of the perceptions of the senses. I mean, your eyes can't hear, so the eye has no concept of sound. Right? The eye doesn't hear me talking. The ear, but the ear doesn't know sight. The tongue doesn't know doesn't know touch. Well, knows some touch. It doesn't know it doesn't know sound or sight, right? So what happens then is something pulls all this together and makes an aggregate out of it. And that aggregate is what we call perception. It's actually what Buddha called perception. It was one of the five skandhas. Then beyond that, we have our objects of mind. We have our ideas about what we perceive, and that's where we live. That's where the ego is. That's where the sense of identity is. I mean, there's nothing inherent in a perception, right? You see the world as it is. If there's no story, if there's nothing laid on top of it, if there's no objects of minds or interpretation, or right, it's pure perception. I am perceiving. Even the idea of being a separate self is a concept based sitting on top of perception, which is now interpreting perception. And so, well, of course it is. They're over there, but that's only our sense of it. Those are all words and ideas that have been applied to just pure experience. Well, I haven't done these in a while, but there's a series of exercises called direct path exercise where you can just break it down to see what you're actually seeing without any story, without any concept. I think I've got it in some of the inner reconciliation course. Actually, I do. I've got a section on the direct path. I think in level 3 of inner reconciliation. So, and then beyond that is the sense of, is really just the sense of consciousness as a separate self. Boy, it's hard to explain because the Buddha uses that word consciousness, but as kind of as repository consciousness. Coming from that is the sense of existence that is attached to a form, and that is what produces body after body, lifetime after lifetime. That is the repository consciousness that Buddha referred to it as. It's that which gives rise to every birth. It is not the ultimate consciousness. The ultimate consciousness is that which is aware of all of it. That which is aware of every piece part of it. Even what we call the consciousness, there's something more subtle that's aware of that. It's aware of the sum total of all the five senses and the object of mind and the consciousness that's holding it. It's tough to use the different words. It's best to see it just as the mind, right? That which is perceiving everything, but is identified with what it's perceiving. It's got a story about it. So you put all of that together, and it becomes what you, consciousness, are actually experiencing. So you're not seeing things as they are. You're seeing them as you believe them to be. So breaking those beliefs down is where all the action is. That's where the whole point is. And as you do that, you experience an increasing amount of freedom. And the world starts to change because the world is nothing but your perceptions. And the world doesn't exist separate from those perceptions. We think of it, the senses are sensing the world in a particular way. There's the world, there's me, there's the senses, and I'm getting. It isn't the case. There are no senses, there are no world. Buddha broke that down into the 18, the 18 realms or something like that, the 18 domains. Broke them all down. They're all perceptions of the mind. We believe that we're perceiving a world, but in fact we're simply experiencing an image. And that image is in consciousness. It appears to consciousness, and it's made of consciousness. If I can put it like that. Barbro, hi from Sweden. Hi. John David said, "Star, all we see as the," and then stops. Let's see. Buddha's Brain says, "My sister Gigi," hi Gigi, "wants to know what is fear." Well, fear is very simple, right? Fear is the physiological state that takes place when the body feels threatened. The heart begins to speed up, the muscles tense, certain hormones and stuff are released into the body. the brain begins to focus all of its attention on how to get out of here. All creative capacity falls away. All the higher functions just disappear. It is a physiological state that the body gets into in order to run away and protect itself. That's what fear is in its essence. Now, as I was just talking about perceptions, we have the perception of fear. Then we got our story about fear. We got all the ideas about fear, all the things that we think it is, all the things that we think are going to trigger it. And our minds are so powerful that we can literally trigger the physical feeling of fear simply by thinking about something. And so we think, oh, that's fearful, but it's an image that the body's reacting to, and because of that reaction, the thought seems to have more power than it really, really does. The same is true of anger. Anger is exactly the same thing, only it's the body preparing to fight. It's the same thing, though. It's the defensive posture, fight or flee, right? And so if it's getting ready to flee, it's called fear. If it's getting ready to fight, it's called anger. But it is the same thing. That's what it is. Now, the way you perceive things, the stories you tell yourself, the beliefs you have, can trigger a sense of fear physiologically in the body. That's why it can feel so very powerful, even though the thing that you're thinking about isn't here. You can think about somebody hurting you and feel afraid and want to, feeling that desire to run away, and there's nobody there. Historically, every critter only reacts in fear when there's actually something there threatening. Other than that, total quietude. Humans don't, because we've been trained to think fearful thoughts. And so we experience fear, a low level of fear, also known as stress, almost all the time, simply because of the barrage of ugly and fearful thoughts that have been foisted on us. I hope that answers your question, Gigi. So the way to become free from unreal fear is to simply pay very close attention to your thinking. Is this really a threat? No, it's not. Matter of fact, 99% of the things that you were afraid were going to happen never happened. So, why are we so afraid? We should be afraid 1% of the time, because that's when anything actually happens. And we shouldn't be afraid until it happens. But we get afraid when we're anticipating something happening, and now we live trying to defend ourselves against what might happen in order to feel safe, and even though we are safe, we don't get to feel safe. Can you see how insane the entire thing has gotten? So I hope that answers your question. Great, thank you for that. Johanna says, the illusion of separation arises by pushing what we sense away. No. No, not really, because children don't push anything away. They're pure experience, and their experience is unfiltered, unbuffered. I mean, it's genuine. It's the real deal, right? The sense of separation is simply taught to us. Right? When we have the initial trauma of realizing that we're vulnerable, something in the environment threatens us, it causes a deep rift within us. And that deep rift gives rise to the belief of a separate self. And it is an illusion. We get the idea that I'm limited to this body, that this body it can get hurt, that there's me here and a world out there. That is a perception that happens in every single human being that isn't real. It isn't true. But we all get it. That's the fall. And it is the common human experience. For some reason, we all get it. It's part of what has to happen. And the awakening is when you see that that is not true and never was. And you realize that the fall was simply the illusion of separation that got ingrained into the nervous system and was acted out as if it was real, experienced it as it was real. And the awakening is when you recognize it was never real. But having gone through it, when the awakening takes place, you never fall asleep again. Does that answer your question? Um, let's see. Mike said, thanks. I've made it clear to her that I absolutely love her as she is. Just want her to know who she really is. I know it's me I need to concentrate on. Thank you. Yeah. It's a hard thing, man. Mike, it's really difficult. It's really difficult. And I know I have, like, not done justice to some relationships I've been in because I really wanted them to get something rather than just loving them really as they are. Really loving them as they are. And you can extend the awakening to that, which means that who they are is consciousness. And consciousness is thinking of itself as a mortal with problems and suffering. You just see that they really are the self, that there isn't anything but the self. That is who they are. You just hold that and just keep that space and just love everything about her and feel that in the depths of your soul and practice it, and good stuff will happen. Good stuff will happen. She may not wake up, but you guys have a much better relationship. Thanks so much, G. Yeah, you're so welcome. John David. So what is meant when Ramana Maharshi says, when the mind is quiet, the world disappears? Yeah. Wow, what a great question. And I just scrolled by it. Yeah, it's from John David. When the mind is quiet, obviously, the world disappears because the world, as something separate from consciousness, only exists as a thought in the mind. The world isn't something. See, the people mistake about that. They think, well, the world is something. If my mind goes quiet, this something is going to go away. The world isn't something. The world is a thought. It doesn't exist outside of the mind. So when the mind goes quiet, the sense of there being a world existing separate from you falls away. And now what are you experiencing? Just experience. So this is no longer the world. It's just this. There's no world anymore. Everything that we had called the world is still here. Remember, the world is just a concept. And we think, oh, the world, well, this is the world. So if the mind goes, all of this is going to disappear, when I'm going to be floating in space? Well, no, your body would disappear too, right? What would be left? Everything, right? Because the world is only a concept. It's a concept projected upon what is actually here. And what is actually here is consciousness and its manifestation. Consciousness in its purest form, which we call pure awareness, and consciousness in its dynamic form, which we call the universe and life. They are one thing. They are one existence, one being. When we think that I am here and there's a world out there, you've created samsara. You've created a world, which is purely the mind. But when it goes quiet, when all the thoughts about what you're experiencing disappear, there's only the pure experience. And in the pure experience, you don't have a duality. You don't have separation. You are simply experiencing yourself. So I keep pointing back to this thing, and this is, of course, the problem, because when you hear non-dual teachers say, well, yeah, there's no world, nothing exists other than you go, they don't bring in either they don't know, or they don't explain very well that what doesn't exist other than you is a world, an objective world, something that exists independent of perception. But of course, within perception, it's no longer the world. It's your perception. It's you. It's God. It's everything becomes one, and that's nirvana. That is what is meant by nirvana. Mr. Balyani said, thanks for answering. I will ponder it. I do see consciousness as primary. It's just how the reversed body-mind mind-body is solved. It's hard to intuit. Well, the way to solve it is there is no mind, there is no body. Right? Those are concepts. Those are ideas. Those are words we use to designate certain things. Put those words to the side and go directly to what you're experiencing, and you'll find that your experience is non-dual. That you're not really experiencing a mind. You're simply experiencing yourself. That which you're perceiving and you as the perceiver just come together because you see they can't possibly be separate. You can't separate the knowing from the known or the knower. You just can't take them apart. The mind can take them apart and call them three different things, but they're not three different things. That's just a way of categorizing and analyzing them. Take that away and you just have pure experience. And then there's not even a body anymore. There's just experience. There's not a mind. There's just experience. It is just pure projectionless being. Carla, it's hard to accept that my husband didn't really exist. That based on illusion, he's only a cast backfill person. Except my husband didn't really exist. That based on this illusion, he is only a cast. No, your husband exists. Of course he exists. This glass exists. I exist talking to you. Right? I don't exist separate from you. I don't exist as a thing out in the world. Right? Of course I exist. Of course you exist. Of course he exists. This particular road and the non-dual road is like filled with potholes. My husband doesn't exist. He's just in my mind. No, he does exist, but he exists as consciousness. Doesn't exist as an object out in the world. Right? Consciousness has infinite number of forms. Just like a composer has infinite pieces of music. Well, not infinite, but a lot of different pieces of music. Right? They're not limited to one thing. Consciousness is not limited to one form. And so he's consciousness, you're consciousness. Consciousness is experiencing consciousness. Consciousness is enjoying consciousness. And all there is consciousness. There's nothing separate from consciousness. So now you can have two and one simultaneously. It's not that he doesn't exist. He doesn't exist as an independent object. He exists as consciousness. It is the concept I'm just trying to pull away from you and point you to the non-dual truth. I'm not trying to get rid of your husband. I'm sure he's a very nice guy. Carla, part of the cast of the story, background people. Well, yeah, and if you want to see your husband truly, you have to drop your stories about him because that's where it gets interfered. The illusion is the ideas we hold about others. Who he really is the self, the pure, unbridled awareness. Right? So now, if you want, the more you see that, the less you will see your ideas and opinions about him or her, if you're somebody else, and the more you will actually see who you're looking at. You will no longer be looking through the eyes of your inner storyteller, the inner director. It will no longer be a cast in your movie because you're dropping the movie. You're done with the movie. You want to see what's actually here. You're tired of sitting in the dark watching pictures flash on a screen. You want to go out and live life. And of course, this is where life actually is. And you'll see him as he is. Because the reality is he's not a cast in your character. You're experiencing that because of your beliefs about him. Drop those beliefs and you'll experience him as he is. And you'll find that he and you are one. John David, thanks for the clarification. You gave me what looks like a grinning Pac-Man. Thank you. Joanna says, I am consciousness having a human experience. Close. It's being called a human experience. You are consciousness experiencing consciousness. We just call it human because it's that particular form and it's a nice name, right? But it's just consciousness experiencing consciousness. You haven't been put into a body. The body is simply an image that's appeared within you. So you take that one step further. You're right. It is. You are consciousness. That's the important part. But now Start breaking down that idea that you're having a human experience, like there's been something that was imposed on you. This is consciousness experiences itself. This is how it experiences it. In this particular moment, it's a human. I don't know. Somewhere else, it could be a Martian, or, some other. Who knows, right? Consciousness has no limits on how it can experience itself. It is not limited to any form whatsoever. Look at our own world. I mean, it's a jellyfish. It's strange little creatures, right? Carla says, "Thank you." Yeah, you're very welcome, Carla. Oh, sorry. That was Carla said, yeah, and then Johanna. So thank you for that question, Johanna. Chrissy says, "Thank you. That is such a beautiful and wise response. I've done that in the past relationships, wanting to help another awaken according to my picture of what they needed." Yeah, drop your picture. Really. You don't know what they need. Yeah. It is really kind of arrogant for us to think we do. Even if you are a fully awakened being, beings don't try to do that. They just love them, hold them, and let grace take its course. And it will. And believe me, it's a lot easier way to live. You lose your own fear of something they may not get it. You lose your fear of their suffering. You fall into this contentment, and of course that creates a safe space for somebody to genuinely awaken. Because the only reason we don't awaken is because we're afraid. We're clinging to a sense of identity because we're afraid. Now what happens if you change the environment that makes it so safe that that fear can begin to lessen? The real you is just going to explode out because it's been being held captive by that false sense of identity. So, let's see, where are we? Temura. Oh, looks like a new name. Temura Rojas. Wow, lovely. Where are you, Temura? The purpose of this human experience is to expand the consciousness that is larger than human life. Yeah. It is consciousness getting to experience itself. And from the point of view of the human being, we are growing and expanding into who we really are. Now, once you get to who you really are, you realize that you've never been anything else but that, but you get the joy of coming home because for a moment you forgot that and you thought you were something else. I mean, that really is how it works, right? So you get to rediscover yourself constantly. It's like falling in love over and over again. Suddenly this person you were with, and you were totally in love, and you fall out of love, and then suddenly it's like, wow, I really like them, and suddenly you're in love again. It can be renewed like that because there's just this fresh discovery of yourself. Consciousness is always rediscovering itself. It's always coming to know itself and falling in love with itself over and over again. So thank you for that, Tamara. Did she tell where she was? No. I'd love to know where you are. The great thing about illusion is to enjoy the awakening. Yes, that's right. It's a punchline. Yeah. It's like, oh, it was an illusion. Boom, it's gone. The entire thing dissolved in a moment. Yes, it's the punchline to the whole joke. She put a ha 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 afterwards. Absolutely. Barbara says, and all the spiritual teachings are also concepts. Yes. Yes, all of them. Even the Buddha said that. And the Buddha, believe me, I regard the Buddha as the greatest teacher of all time. As I said before, there hasn't been a thing I've ever discovered that he hadn't talked about it already. And the more I read, the more I go into the sutras, the more I go, I've not had an original thought in my life. I mean, he covered absolutely everything. And he said his teachings were provisional. There's a point at which you simply let them all go. All, as they said in the Heart Sutra, all dharmas, that is, all spiritual teachings, are empty. What that means is they are empty of inherent existence. They have no inherent quality. There's no such thing as an absolute teaching. The teaching is only a reflection of the teacher and the student in the moment, and is not permanent or absolute. And the moment that relationship isn't there anymore, that teaching no longer exists. Now there are some that have endured. The Dharma of the wheel of Dharma, as they said in Buddhism, has endured because the world needs it. But it will run out when we don't need it anymore. It'll just stop. I mean, there were things I used to study that were written, 100 years ago, and now I read them and I look at the language, and the language is completely out of date. You can't. It's almost you can't understand it. Even stuff written back in the 50s. There was a very different style in the way in which we said things and expressed things, and the metaphors were different. So they're out of date. Boom. All teachings are provisional. They're only to get you to the point where you don't need teaching anymore. Once you see who you are, what more do you need? You're done. It's over. You don't need another encyclopedia. You don't need another class. You don't need another teacher. My job is to put myself out of a job. I want you all to say, gee, you're fired. Yay. Tamura says, spiritual teachings are shared systems of reference to describe our experience of that which that does really not exist. Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. They're a system of reference, right? But every reference point is itself, it's not permanent. It's temporary. It's an agreement point within a certain system, and it holds the system together, and it works until it's no longer needed. Once you get on a train in New York and you take it to Boulder, Colorado, when you get off the train, you don't try to take the train with you. You don't need it anymore. You're there, right? And so we need not make any teaching sacred. I mean, Krishnamurti would say that he's not a teacher. There is no teacher. You don't need a teacher. Don't have a teacher. Of course, then he spent 50 years teaching every day. But there's no contradiction in that, really. Right? He was just speaking the truth. And he spoke it differently at different times in his career. And Buddha's did the same thing. I mean, his early teaching of the five skandhas and the Four Noble Truths of Suffering, which are just one of the pinnacles of pillars of Buddhism, he completely dissolved. He said that no path, the Four Noble Truths of Suffering, there's suffering, there's an end to suffering, or excuse me, there's suffering, there's a cause of suffering, there's an end to suffering, and there's a means to end. And he says no suffering, no cause, no path, and no end. That's empty in the Heart Sutra. Foomp, his own teachings, right out the window. So if the Buddha will throw out his, well, the rest of us should be pretty quick to throw ours out as well. SS, can you talk about religion? Yeah. After awakening, I feel that all my religious beliefs aren't valid anymore, but still don't know how to deal with my family's strict religious beliefs. Great. Don't. They aren't valid anymore, but they are to them. Remember, a religious belief, if there's not an openness, right, if it's really fundamental, if there's no openness, if it isn't serving the purpose of opening them up to self-exploration, to find out who and what God actually is, but instead is a belief system that says this is what it is and you have to believe it, it is completely based on fear, right? And so to question that is to fill their hearts with fear. My best advice is to remain quiet. Now, if you can't deal with their strict religious beliefs, then you've got to go deeper into your awakening until it doesn't bother you anymore. Until it's like, well, okay, that's that I'm experiencing them as that, and just transcend it, go beyond it. I mean, it may be necessary that you have to withdraw yourself from your family. That does happen. I did it. I had to. It was just not a very healthy environment, and so I basically withdrew myself from the family. And shortly after I did that, I got the opportunity to move 2,000 miles away. I moved from Chicago to San Francisco, and I never went back to Chicago. But it was something I had to do because it simply didn't work. It didn't work for any of us. So don't think you have to be there. Don't think you have to tolerate it. Don't think you have to say anything about it. But if there's some discomfort with it, get to that discomfort and free yourself of it, so it doesn't bother you in the slightest what their views are. Their views are going to be their views. They're going to be in their beliefs. The beautiful thing about life is we experience the consequences of our beliefs. Eventually, those consequences open our eyes to see that we are creating suffering for ourselves. And then we become willing to question assumptions. For most, not until then. Until then, they're just going to hold on to it doggedly. And you can see how religion can become so fanatical. It can kill. It will kill to protect the belief systems. So it become firmly established in your own peace. Then you'll see clearly to if there's anything you need to do with them, if they can even touch you. But it's a good thing, because when you're with family, it's a good way to help the nervous system really let the awakening sink into the entire system, and not just be in the mind. Because when you're with your family, it's going to trigger things in you that only your family can trigger, and you can welcome that. You don't have to avoid that, but just welcome that. Oh, there it is. That's the old version of myself that's still active in the body. Good. I'm going to just let it be there, take my hands off it, let the energy move through, and become free of it. Tamura says, SS, best look with that, take it as a personal challenge to transcend your not self. Yeah. Carla says, thank you. Very good. Tamura says, oops. You still have in common spirituality, or at least the hunger for it. That's a great common place. Yeah. Yeah, if... it depends on how open they are to looking at things. I originally became very involved in there was more spiritual teachings. It was metaphysics, but it was Christian based. So I learned how to speak that language. Later on, I became really interested in Christian theology and studied a lot. I studied the Bible quite extensively for many years, and became well versed in it. So I'm pretty good at speaking to all sorts of different states of mind about it. If there's some openness, you can find some common ground. But if there isn't any openness, which is often the case, which is the case with a fundamentalist, there isn't a discussion, because it isn't about discovery. It's about holding doggedly to the beliefs, because if you don't, you're in trouble. Your ass is going to hell. So depending on the level of openness, there may be some common ground you can find there, but there might not be. So I don't really know, but you can kind of figure that out. Let's see. And so it says, thank you so much, Tamara. That was very nice of you to chime in there on his behalf. Hi, G. I am Bolivian and live in Spain. Warm greetings and many thanks and blessings. Oh, beautiful. Thank you much for sharing that. I love knowing where everybody is. Renee. Could having faith in Jesus be the same as being present? To really have faith in Jesus, if you really went that Christian road, faith in Jesus would mean there's only Him present, not you. That's what it means to completely surrender to Christ. It's not you and Him. It's not you has surrendered. You've surrendered you. You haven't just surrendered everything to God. You've surrendered you to God. That's the step. That's the mystical step. I guess you could say. A lot of people wouldn't see it that way because they see it as you're a horrible sinner. But even if you are a horrible sinner, you say, okay, replace the horrible sinner with you. Make the horrible sinner and go away, which is, of course, what the forgiveness means. The horrible sinner is gone, and Christ has taken its place at the center of your heart. That's what it means to truly have faith in Jesus, to truly believe in Jesus. Right? Not just have faith that He is now living your life for you. Right? and the only thing you have to do is be aware of when you're wanting to take your life back. That is the ego, right? I want to take back. I want to do this one. I really want this. If you're completely surrendered, then every want, every desire, every feeling, every thought is coming from him. It's not coming from you. And that's what it really means to be in Christ, to completely surrender yourself to the Lord. So I hope that helps you with that. I mean, because there are equivalents in other religions, or many people feel that way about Krishna and Shiva and various of the Hindu gods. It's the devotional path, but it's gotten kind of whacked out in the West, the way we've approached it, and we've turned it into this thing that's, you're a horrible sinner and you just accept that Jesus is your savior, and you go on. You're still a horrible sinner, and you're just trying to live right. I mean, we've kind of turned it into this moralistic thing. It's really kind of creepy. You've surrendered. You're gone. You're not in the picture anymore. You have surrendered your life to God. From that moment on, God is living your life. So don't take it back. From that moment on, you're no longer the sinner. You have been replaced you've been washed pure in the blood of the Lamb. You are now filled with the Spirit of God, which means you're not the sinner anymore. You're not even there. It's a beautiful prayer that I heard it's from a monk. It just says, Lord, replace me with you. It's perfect. That could be your prayer. Replace me with you. And then let Jesus do his work. SS says, God is experiencing life as everything, so we are God, no separation. So beautiful. Yes. I mean, consciousness, another word for consciousness is God, the great I am. I hesitate to say that we are God, because most people do that from the egoic point of view, and somehow they think somehow now the separate self you believe yourself to be is now God, and it can do whatever it wants and manifest stuff and ask the genie of the universe for things. That is the height of egotism, and so we have to be careful, because the ego is always looking for a way to kind of sneak back in and ta-da, here I am, to try to prop itself back up again. Not because it's a thing, but because it's a bunch of programmed responses. It's the way the system was trained to be. And as we're eliminating all of that, it gets weaker and weaker and weaker. So be very, very clear, if you're using the word God, you are referring to the infinite, illimitable consciousness, the illimitable self-awareness that called itself I am. That sense of I am that we all have is God. That is the God within. That is the truth within. You can, if you want, you can refer to that as Jesus. I mean, it doesn't matter what you call him. You can call him Buddha nature. You can call it Christ consciousness. You can call it Jesus Christ, my personal Savior. It's referring to that, the consciousness of existence, the place where the buck stops, the ultimate absolute point, which would have to be what we would call God. So when you use it, make sure you're referring to that, and that, like, we are God. You're not referring to a bunch of people, because a bunch of people are not God. And thinking that you're a separate bunch of people is the antithesis of God. That's the devil. That's the obstruction. That is the one that falls out of heaven because it believes in itself, and there's nothing there. Renee says, I'm not versed in Christianity. I would like to have common ground with religious people. Then you will. Just all I was kind of fanatical about it. I've been fanatical about a lot of stuff. And I just was hungry. I had some very deep spiritual experiences. I grew up in the Midwest. I had no idea how to process them or make any sense out of them. So I found whatever I could to try to make some sense out of it. So I studied the Bible religiously, no pun intended, with multiple translations and various kinds of concordances and Bible dictionaries and all sorts of different things to try to glean the deeper meaning of it. But you don't need to do all that. All you need to do is be willing to listen and sense when somebody engages, and ask people, excuse me, and ask people with a genuine desire to know, not a genuine desire to change their minds. That's, of course, the fundamental. The people come to the door, knocking on the door. Hi, we'd love to talk to you about God. Well, they don't want to talk to us about God. They want to tell you about God and make you and get you to believe theirs. They have no interest in having a conversation about God. They don't seem to have interest in having a conversation with God either. So if you are interested, be interested. Ask questions and really want to know and understand the answers. It's very enlivening and really can quicken you to begin to understand the various ways in which people think, which the more awake you get and the deeper you get into this, you become increasingly aware of all the different ways in which people get stuck. And you'll see the common theme. And the common theme is trying to compensate for something that they feel is missing inside of them. And they hold on to it tightly for fear that they're simply going to fall apart and die and suffer and lose. And so hold on. They imagine themselves like on a life raft in the middle of the ocean when in fact they're sitting at a pool bar in Bali. Oh no, would you like another drink? I mean, it really is like that, but this is, you see how people create their own suffering. And that just awakens this deep bodhisattva compassion in you. So, let's see. Carla's giving a thumbs up. Upazor, Apazor. What does the dream look? Why does the dream look like this? It can't be a coincidence. Why does any of your dreams look like anything? Is it a coincidence? It's just the way it happens to look. Remember, there's an infinite possibilities. It just happens to look like this. It could look like something else. There's nothing that dictated it being like this. There's nothing outside of consciousness to impose some kind of rule or some kind of environment on it that made it respond. There's nothing outside of consciousness. So all of this is simply this is how consciousness is imagining itself in this moment. That's it. That's why the dream looks the way it does. It can look like anything, but right now it looks like this. 1,000 years from now, it won't look like this. 1,000,000 years from now, it won't look like this. It'll be something completely different. It didn't look like this 1,000,000 years ago. That's the nature. It's infinite and inexhaustible. There are no limits on the forms. So it's okay that it looks like this. There's no magic in it. There's nothing special about it. Right? I take that back. There's one thing very special about it. The nature of the dream and the nature of us right here at this moment in time is that the apex of the dream, where it has the potential to end, where consciousness wakes up from its own dream and experiences the incredible bliss of reunion with itself. I think I have exhausted the questions. It's 5:19, so any more questions before I begin to bring it to a close? Well, thank you all. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for the great questions, the active participation. A couple of new people. Thank you very much. Please like and share the video because it really does help. Finding the people out there who are ready to inquire deeply into themselves, who are ready to ask the deep probing questions. Because we'd really love to have them here where we are doing just that. Ali says, how do we wake up this dream? Eli says, good show. Oh, whoa. How do we wake up to this dream? Well, you are, aren't you? You have to call it... the guy in the dream doesn't wake up, right? The guy on the TV can't change the channel, right? So the one in the dream isn't waking up. This is how we think of it. That, oh, I'm waking up. That self-image we have is somehow now going to become an awakened self-image, right? It doesn't work that. It doesn't work that way. You wake up from the self-image, and you discover that you have always been the consciousness. That it's the dream of the consciousness, and it is the consciousness waking it up. The alarm clock is sounding. It's sounding outside of the dream. And you're hearing it faintly within the dream. And you think it's in the dream, but it's not. Probably had that experience somewhere waking up, having some sound inside your dream, and it gets incorporated in the dream, and then you realize it's the alarm clock, and it's not in the dream at all. Something outside is knocking. Hey, wake up. Wake up. Right? So it really is a matter of pure grace. It's happening. The only reason you're here listening to me is because it's already happening. It's taking place. You wouldn't be here if it wasn't. So, okay, thank you all. Thanks for another amazing satsang. Thank you from Renee. Carla, thank you. Oh, got lots of hearts and stuff. Pam, a couple more questions in there, but I've got to call it now. So, thank you all for being here. It is such an honor to be able to share this with you all. It just is such an honor to be able to to share what's on my heart, to be able to share what means the most to me, and see how it benefits and makes others happy. So, thank you all. Until next time, namaste.